Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner.
Hello, I'm Adam Cherry, and this is GBN Originals. President Donald Trump, you might have heard, is back in the White House, and it's taken less than a week for him to cause his first trade war. Luckily, it only lasted about less than 12 hours, I think. Let's get into the latest events that have captured the attention of the world, and I'm sure will spark heated debate across social media platforms. This is Donald Trump, after all. Every time he breathes, someone tweets something nasty about him. So, what's happened? Well, Trump has secured a major victory in his ongoing battle against illegal immigration. What am I talking about? Well, the Colombian government, initially resistant to accepting deportation flights, has now offered up its own presidential plane, talking about winning, to facilitate the return of illegal migrants. Now, this breakthrough came after a tense but pretty brief standoff between the two nations. Colombian President Gustavo Petro initially blocked 2 deportation flights, allegedly citing concerns about the treatment of the migrants, and he stated, "I deny the entry of American planes carrying Colombian migrants into our territory." Particularly, he was aggrieved over the use of military planes, but guess what? Trump is having none of it. He threatened Colombia with a series of punitive measures, including a 25% tariff on all goods coming into the US from Colombia. That would jump to 50% after just 1 week. He also implemented a travel ban and visa revocations for the Colombian government officials and their allies and supporters. And guess what? Faced with these obvious and devastating economic consequences, Colombian administration very quickly, and I mean within a matter of hours, changed its tune. In a statement released while under pressure, the government announced the government of Colombia, under the direction of President Gustavo Petro, has arranged the presidential plane to facilitate the dignified return of the compatriots. Yeah, that is right. They are using their own plane to help Trump take these migrants. What kind of win is that? I'd say that's 100% victory for the White House. They will be screaming about this for weeks. Now, Trump's approach to immigration has been characteristically uncompromising, shall we say. We know the routine here. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed this sentiment earlier this week, stating, America will, quote, no longer be lied to nor taken advantage of. So this stance is not going to be limited to Colombia. Brazil is also feeling the heat of Trump's immigration policies. Its foreign ministry condemning what it called the degrading treatment of Brazilian migrants on deportation flights, but that is not going to stop those flights leaving the tarmac. Now, Trump's aggressive stance on immigration is already having far-reaching consequences across Latin America. Many countries in the region are already grappling with their own economic challenges and political instability. So guess what? The threat of severe US sanctions is not going to help that, and they're noticing it, and they're noticing it quickly. The Colombian case serves as a warning to these nations and to those migrants considering crossing the border that if they make that journey, they are incredibly likely now to be turned around. You're seeing it already directly on the border with Mexico. Videos released over the last few days of migrants arriving and saying, there's no point going. There's no point trying anymore. You'll see videos of them in handcuffs being led onto the planes. They're warning others who are thinking of coming over not to bother because they will get caught and they will get sent back immediately. It's extraordinary footage. And obviously these actions are going to, they may potentially reshape migration patterns across the West, because with the US taking a harder line on deportations, migrants, as I said, they'll either seek alternative destinations or they won't even leave their home countries in the first place. So this is a huge issue. It's why Trump, or at least one of the main reasons why Trump won, because he was taking a hard stance on this issue. The Americans absolutely, I wouldn't say love, but this is a very important issue, particularly for those on the border states. So seeing this is an important signal to those voters that they're taking it seriously. Now, while Trump was flexing his diplomatic muscles with the Colombians, there's another interesting development closer to home across the pond that I want to talk about as well, because after nearly a week of silence between Trump and Sir Keir Starmer, they have finally picked up the phone and had a chat with each other. It took almost 7 days, but here we are. Now, the delay in communication was starting to raise eyebrows because traditionally we enjoy a close relationship with the US, or at least in theory. We always talk about the special relationship. It was reported that Trump had already spoken with leaders from China, Saudi Arabia, even El Salvador before contacting the British Prime Minister. So that suggests where his priorities really lie. But nonetheless, it finally happened. And when it came, it was a mix of the personal and the political, but it's revealing what wasn't said in this conversation as much as what was. Now, according to the readouts from both the White House and Downing Street, Trump opened the conversation by offering condolences to Sir Keir Starmer for the loss of his brother, who passed away over Christmas. Starmer, in return, congratulating Trump on his inauguration. All very warm and fluffy. How are you doing? A nice handshake. Yeah, good to know you. Now, the conversation covered several points. Trump's role in securing a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. Notable that Sir Keir Starmer was quick to lavish praise on the Trump administration for doing that. The release particularly of Emily Damari, with Trump sending his best wishes to her family. She was the British hostage held in Gaza. Talked more broadly about Middle Eastern security. They talked about trade, and Starmer particularly, and this is interesting, okay, because Starmer was very keen to highlight UK's deregulation efforts to boost growth. And we've seen the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, make similar noises over the last couple of days. Obviously, they've realised that 6 months of talking down the economy and saying things can only get worse isn't very good for investor confidence. It's not very good for the economy. Who knew? But nonetheless, good to see. I will say perhaps the most significant outcome of the call was the agreement for the two leaders to meet soon. This hasn't happened yet. The upcoming meeting will obviously be closely watched. It'll set the tone for US and UK relations in the coming years, particularly given the relationship or lack thereof between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump in previous years. Remember, Keir Starmer is the man who said this during Donald Trump's first term when he was, well, before Keir Starmer had diplomatic issues with the US to worry about. Take a look at this.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner.
Let's just play that one more time. I just want to remind you of what he said.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner.
I wouldn't have Donald Trump over for dinner. Okay. Anyway, in September, Donald Trump had Keir Starmer over for dinner, and apparently they had a fantastic time, and now they're best friends. And in this readout today, we heard that Donald Trump said he's a very good person. Starmer's a great person. He's a bit liberal. He did say that. But look, he seems to be doing a good job, and Keir Starmer himself also saying he was very pleased to talk to Donald Trump, and everything's all hunky-dory. Still, nonetheless, the relationship between Trump and Starmer is sparking discussions about the future of the special relationship between the US and the UK. Does it even exist? Is it really a real thing, or is it just platitudes? Now, while the eventual conversation, as we've heard, has been described as positive, the fact there was an initial delay is obviously leading to speculation about potential shifts in diplomatic priorities under the Trump administration. And as I said, it doesn't help that much that throughout the first Trump administration, whilst Keir Starmer was still in opposition and could say whatever he liked, really, everyone on the front bench, that shadow front bench, was criticising the Trump administration. I think even the foreign secretary called Donald Trump a neo-fascist, woman-hating, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, now they've had dinner together and it's all fine, apparently. So some analysis suggests that Trump's America First policy will lead to a recalibration of international alliances. I think that's right. I think you're seeing that already. And that might affect long-standing partnerships like that with the UK. Is he more interested in dealing with China, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East than he is with us just across the pond? Either way, there's of course a shared sense of history and common interest between the two nations. Maybe that will ultimately prevail. But look, hard economics, I think, is more important than soft power and the history between the nations. Clearly, that's what they need to focus on. And Trump's aggressive approach to immigration and international relations is unsurprisingly drawing strong reactions from both sides of the political aisle in the US and the UK. I just want to talk about the US reaction for a second, because Republican lawmakers, as you'd expect, are rallying behind Trump. They love all this stuff. They love the rhetoric. They love seeing the illegal migrants boarding the planes in handcuffs. The stance on illegal immigration and his willingness to use tariffs and economic leverage, they love all that. They lap that up. But as you would expect, the Democrats are slightly more critical, to put it mildly. According to the Dems, they risk damaging international relationships and partnerships, these tariffs and this trade war. And it could actually have negative long-term consequences for US foreign policy. That's the argument. In this instance, however, given how quickly the Colombians capitulated, it looks like it's worked. So 1-0 Trump. Public opinion on Trump's actions remains divided, mirroring the broader polarization in America, I suppose. Obviously, supporters view it as a necessary step to addressing these long-term issues. It has to be done. On the other hand, you'll see a critic saying it's an overreach of executive power. You saw that when, during the brief window when this trade war was taking place, a trade war which lasted all of about 10 minutes, you saw a lot of left-wing commentators on Twitter, X, saying he's going to make the price of your coffee more expensive. He's going to make the price of all these goods unaffordable. What a mistake this is. Cutting off your nose to spite your face. Well, look, turned out about 5 minutes later, the Colombians had completely capitulated, and it had all worked out. So there we go. Nonetheless, media coverage of these events has been intense as usual. 24-hour news cycle going over every dot and comma. And the controversy has reignited debates about immigration more widely, the power of the presidency, the executive power of the presidency, and the role of the US in the international community. Now, as for that phone call between Trump and Starmer, I'm sure everyone's glad it finally happened, but what's revealing about it isn't what's in there so much as what isn't. Nothing on Chagos, which we know the Trump administration are furious about. Nothing on the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to Washington, or potentially the appointment instead of David Miliband. None of that. And that is so important because those are the areas where this new blossoming bromance could unravel very, very quickly. Now, Trump, look, we know he's transactional. You shake his hand and say he's a good man and a great president. He'll probably get on well with you for at least the next 10 minutes. So this is a smart play from Downing Street to pretend that they suddenly are best friends with him, even though you have to ignore the last sort of 10 years of commentary on it. But whether it lasts depends on what happens next. Will he allow the appointment of Peter Mandelson? Will he force through? Will Keir Starmer force through this £9 billion giveaway of the Chagos Islands, something the US is absolutely opposed to? If he does, will this relationship be a little bit more tense? I think so. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Adam Cherry. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel.